The lost souls of Tromelin Island. The year was 1761, a time of greed, ambition, and cruelty disguised as progress. On the azure waters of the Indian Ocean, a French merchant ship named Lutil sailed with purpose and a dark secret. Its cargo was not silks or spices, but 160 human beings. Malagasy men, women, and children, taken by force from their homeland in Madagascar, bound for a life of slavery in distant colonies. This is their story. The ship's captain, Jean Lafargue, was an experienced seaman but a stubborn and arrogant man. His crew whispered of his temper and his refusal to heed advice. To make matters worse, his first officer, Barthélemy Castellan, openly opposed the illegal slave trade and the treachery that had led them to this journey. But Lafargue, driven by profit and blinded by hubris, dismissed Castellan's protests. The Malagasy captives were crammed into the ship's hold like livestock, chained and packed so tightly they could barely move. The air reeked of sweat, salt, and despair. Above deck, the sailors worked in tense silence. They knew the dangers of carrying illegal cargo, and they feared not only the sea but also the consequences of being caught. The omen. For days, the ship sailed under clear skies, the sun scorching the wooden deck. But as they charted a route through uncharted waters, the ship's navigator grew uneasy. The maps were old and unreliable, and the reefs surrounding this part of the Indian Ocean were infamous for their danger. Castellan, ever the cautious officer, pleaded with Lafargue to change course. "Lafargue, we risk the lives of everyone on board," Castellan urged one evening. But Lafargue laughed, his voice as sharp as the knife he always kept at his belt. "Superstitions and cowardice, Castellan. That's all I hear from you. We'll take the faster route, and you'll see. The gods favor the bold." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The sea was calm that night, almost unnaturally so, and the silence felt heavy. A young cabin boy later claimed he saw shadows moving beneath the water, though no one paid him any mind. The wreck. On the night of July 31st, 1761, as the ship sailed under a moonless sky, disaster struck. Without warning, the hull of Lutil slammed into a coral reef. The sound was deafening, a thunderous crack of wood splitting followed by screams and chaos. The ship shuddered violently, throwing sailors and captives alike to the deck. Water poured into the hold where the Malagasy captives were chained. Panic erupted as they screamed and struggled against their bindings, the rising seawater threatening to drown them. Above deck, the crew fought to stay upright as the ship tilted dangerously. "Abandon ship!" Lafargue shouted, his voice barely audible over the crashing waves. The crew scrambled for lifeboats, ignoring the cries from below deck. Castellan, unable to stand by, grabbed an axe and ran below. He hacked at the chains, freeing as many captives as he could before the water rose too high. By morning, the survivors, 123 Malagasy captives and around 120 French sailors, found themselves on a desolate strip of land, Tromelin Island. The island of despair. Tromelin Island was no paradise. Barely a kilometer wide, it was little more than a flat expanse of sand and rock, battered by relentless winds and the unforgiving sun. There were no trees, no fresh water, and no shelter. The ocean surrounding the island was both their prison and their tormentor, taunting them with the promise of escape, yet offering no means to achieve it. The French sailors quickly took charge, dividing the survivors into groups. Using the wreckage of Lutil, they constructed makeshift shelters and gathered what provisions they could salvage: barrels of flour and a few crates of salted meat. But these supplies wouldn't last long. The Malagasy captives, though free of their chains, were not free of the prejudice that had brought them there. The sailors viewed them as expendable labor, ordering them to dig wells in the sand in a desperate attempt to find water. Days turned into weeks, and the island's harsh conditions began to take their toll. When the food ran out, they turned to the sea. The island's only bounty was its wildlife: turtles, seabirds, and their eggs. These were hunted and shared sparingly, though the sailors always took the lion's share. Tensions simmered between the two groups, but survival left little room for rebellion. The betrayal. After a month on the island, the sailors made a decision that would seal their place in history as villains. They had been using the wreckage of Luteal to build a raft large enough to carry them back to Ile-de-France, modern-day Mauritius, where they could seek rescue. The Malagasy watched as the raft neared completion. Hope flickered in their hearts. Perhaps salvation was near. But on August 11, 1761, their hopes were shattered. The French sailors, led by Lafargue, boarded the raft and set sail, leaving the Malagasy behind. "We'll send help," Lafargue promised, though the words rang hollow. The Malagasy stood on the shore, watching the raft disappear into the horizon. Some wept, others stood in stunned silence. But help did not come. 15 years of survival. The days stretched into weeks, then months. The Malagasy survivors, abandoned and betrayed, refused to give up. They dug deeper wells, using stones to line the walls and capture rainwater. They fashioned tools from coral and turtle shells. They built their own shelters from the island's coral stones, carefully stacking them to protect against the fierce winds. These small, round huts became their homes, a testament to their ingenuity and resilience. The years passed, and their numbers dwindled. Some succumbed to hunger, others to the merciless elements. Yet those who remained found ways to endure. They clung to their traditions, singing songs and telling stories of Madagascar, keeping their culture alive in the face of despair. Meanwhile, in Mauritius, the French colonial government did little to fulfill Lafargue's promise. The Malagasy were forgotten, their plight buried beneath bureaucracy and apathy. The rescue. It wasn't until 1776, 15 years after the wreck, that a French naval officer named Chevalier de Tromelin learned of their fate. Horrified, he launched a rescue mission. When his ship arrived at Tromelin Island, the scene that greeted him was both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. Of the 123 souls left behind, only 7 women and a baby remained. These survivors, weathered by the years, emerged from their coral huts like ghosts. Their faces were etched with both suffering and defiance. They had endured the unendurable and lived to see salvation. De Tromelin ensured their safe passage to Mauritius, where they were treated as free individuals rather than property. Their story spread across France, a chilling reminder of the horrors of the slave trade and the resilience of the human spirit. A haunting legacy. Tromelin Island remains uninhabited today, its sands whispering the stories of those who once fought to survive there. The wreck of Luteal lies beneath its waters, a silent witness to the cruelty and courage that unfolded on its shores. The tale of Tromelin is one of betrayal and resilience, a haunting reminder of the costs of greed and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Let us never forget the souls who endured, nor the lesson their story teaches us about humanity's capacity for both cruelty and hope. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos.